Welcome to Maritime Pakistan, your gateway to the fascinating world of oceans and the opportunities they present to every one of us. Today, we're exploring naval warfare through the book Fleet Tactics and Coastal Combat. Specifically, we're diving deep into the 6th chapter, Evolution of Tactics in the Age of Missile Warfare. We're about to see how the entire game at sea has been completely rewritten over the last century.
So, what are we getting into today? Well, we'll kick things off with the nuclear age and see how its shadow changed, well, everything. Then we'll look at the arrival of the anti-ship missile and how it just tore up the old rulebook. We'll dissect the real lessons from the Falklands War, crunch the numbers on what missile damage actually looks like, and rethink what truly makes a warship effective. Finally, we'll bring it all together on the complex coastal battlefields of today.
You know, to really understand naval tactics today, we have to go back to the one weapon that threatened to make navies obsolete altogether, the atomic bomb. Its incredible power forced a total, ground-up rethinking of how a fleet could even survive out on the open ocean.
And this shows just how dramatic that shift was. In World War II, ships huddled together. It was all about mutual protection, creating this dense wall of anti-aircraft fire. Concentration was the name of the game. But with the threat of a single nuclear bomb, that very concentration became a fatal weakness. So the strategy completely flipped. Fleets scattered into what they called haystack formations, spreading out so far that one blast couldn't possibly wipe them all out. The goal was to become needles in a haystack.
Now, this new way of thinking had some, well, let's call them unintended consequences. 3 huge ones, in fact. First, if a single nuke could vaporize any ship, why bother with tons of heavy armor? So warships started being built with a lot less staying power. Second, defense shifted from close-in guns to long-range surface-to-air missiles, or SAMs, designed to shoot down bombers way out on the horizon. And third, that old instinct for sticking together, for close-in mutual defense, it kind of faded away. This created a fleet that was totally ready for World War III, but maybe not for other, more conventional threats.
And right into this environment, with these brand new vulnerabilities, came a new weapon that exploited them perfectly: the conventional anti-ship cruise missile. And this, folks, is where the rules change. All over again.
The missile's debut was, to put it mildly, explosive. In 1967, the sinking of the Israeli destroyer Eilat by Egyptian missiles was a massive wake-up call for every navy on the planet. Its effectiveness was proven again and again in the early 70s, but the real trial by fire, the main event, was the tanker wars in the Persian Gulf during the 1980s. That conflict saw more anti-ship missiles flying than any other time in history.
And the numbers from that war really tell the story. Over half of all attacks on shipping came from anti-ship missiles. They were the dominant weapon, period. And they were the #1 reason ships were being lost. The age of missile warfare wasn't coming, it had arrived.
All right, now let's talk about the Falklands. The 1982 war in the South Atlantic was the first real showdown between 2 modern missile-armed navies. It was a short, brutal fight, and a lot of the initial takeaways were shaped more by shock and awe than by cool-headed analysis.
So what did we really learn? For years, this conflict was used to justify some pretty sweeping and often wrong conclusions. It's time we separated the myths from the actual reality.
The headlines at the time were dramatic. After HMS Sheffield was hit and sunk by a single missile, you had people declaring the surface warship was obsolete. The story became that attacks would now come out of the blue, with no warning, that combat was deadlier than ever for the crews, and that nuclear subs were this unstoppable new threat. But really, these were just knee-jerk reactions.
Because when you take a step back and really look at the history, a much wiser story comes into view. The war didn't prove warships were useless, it proved you need modern warships to fight a modern war. The key to survival wasn't just luck, it was effective scouting, finding the other guy before he finds you. The loss of screening ships like the Sheffield wasn't a failure. That was their job. They were out front, taking the risks to protect the carriers. And maybe most surprisingly, while the machines were getting destroyed at a high rate, casualties among the sailors were actually trending downward compared to World War II.
Okay, let's put some hard numbers to this whole thing. Just how much more lethal is a modern missile compared to the weapons of the past? The answer is pretty staggering.
First, let's get a key concept down: the firepower kill. This doesn't mean sinking a ship. It means damaging it just enough that it can no longer fight. Its sensors are fried, its weapons are offline. To do that to a big World War II cruiser, it took on average a little under 2 1,000-pound bombs.
But to actually put that same ship on the bottom of the ocean? Well, that took an average of 9 bombs. That really shows you the incredible staying power these older armored ships had. They could take a real beating. So there it is, the crucial ratio. It took about 5 times more punishment to sink a ship than to just take it out of the fight. Remember that number, because the modern version of this math changes absolutely everything.
And here's the game changer. Because modern warships have less of that built-in staying power, the math is totally flipped. Now, just 1 or 2 modern anti-ship missiles are enough to get a firepower kill on most warships. The missile is the great equalizer, packing the punch of an entire World War II bombing raid into a small, fast, and relatively cheap package.
This new, hyper-lethal world forces us to completely reevaluate what makes a warship valuable. It's not just about who has the biggest guns anymore. It's about who can take a punch and keep on fighting. This brings us right back to that firepower kill idea. In a battle, your immediate goal isn't sinking every single enemy ship. It's neutralizing them as a threat as fast as possible. If you can disable an enemy missile ship, you've won that tactical engagement. Sinking it is a great bonus, a campaign objective. In the missile age, that distinction is absolutely critical.
So, how should we measure a ship's real worth? The book proposes this concept called net delivered combat power. This isn't just about raw firepower. It's about how much of that power can actually be delivered over time, factoring in survivability. A ship with 100 missiles that gets knocked out by the very first hit has a net delivered power of 0.
So where does this all come to a head? Not on the wide open oceans of the past, but in the crowded, complex, and incredibly dangerous waters right off the coast. These are the literal waters. And this isn't empty ocean we're talking about. It's a messy, cluttered environment full of commercial ships, fishing boats, islands. It's the perfect place for a small boat with a powerful missile to hide, and an absolute nightmare for a large warship's sensors.
And in these waters, you get a clash between 2 very different kinds of navies. The coastal navy has a defensive mission. Use everything they've got, land-based missiles, small boats, to deny access to their shores. The goal isn't to defeat a superpower, but to make an attack so painful, so costly, that the attacker just gives up. The maritime power, on the other hand, has the opposite job, to project force into that contested space, meeting the coastal navy on its home turf.
This all leaves us with a modern twist on a very old military saying, a ship's a fool to fight a fort. Well, today, the fort isn't made of stone walls. It's a network of land-based missiles, aircraft, and sensors. In this new age, is a fleet sailing into those dangerous coastal waters making a fool's bargain? That really is the central question facing modern navies today. We hope that you liked today's video. Post your questions in the comments section for future videos.